The rain had been falling since morning, soft but steady, painting the streets of Portland in silver streaks. Emily Harris wasn't planning to go anywhere after work. Her plan was simple: go home, warm up leftover soup, and forget how confusing the last few weeks had felt. But then her phone buzzed, and everything changed. "Ethan, are you free for just a few minutes?" "I'm at the cafe." "No pressure." Emily stared at the screen for a long moment. She knew she should say no. She had promised herself that last time was the final time that she'd stop giving her heart reasons to wander. But something inside her pulled in a direction her mind didn't approve of. And so, against her better judgment, she grabbed her coat and umbrella and stepped into the rain. Walking to the cafe felt like walking into a decision she wasn't ready to make. Every step felt like a tiny argument between her heart and her head. Her head kept reminding her that she had things to protect her peace, her routine, the comfort she had built for herself. But her heart whispered something softer, something harder to resist. "You need to see him." When she reached the cafe, warm yellow lights glowed through the windows. It looked safe. It looked harmless. But the moment she stepped inside and saw Ethan sitting in the far corner, she realized nothing about this meeting was harmless. He looked up at her with that familiar smile, the one that made her chest tighten before she even sat down. His blue eyes softened with relief, like he had been waiting for her longer than he admitted. Emily felt her resolve weaken instantly. "Hey," Ethan said, standing to pull out a chair for her. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either," she replied, slipping off her coat. "It's been a long day." "You look like it's been longer than that," he said gently. His tone wasn't flirtatious. Not bold, not inappropriate. It was simply sincere. And that sincerity was what made everything so complicated. Emily tried to focus on the menu board, on the steady hum of conversation around them, on the soft jazz playing in the background. But no matter where she looked, she could feel Ethan's attention on her, not in a heavy way, but in a way that told her he genuinely cared. That was the danger. Ethan waved to the barista. "Want your usual?" She nodded. He remembered everything about her coffee, her favorite pastries, the way she tapped her fingers on the table when she was nervous. She once joked he could read her like a book. He laughed, but never denied it. When he sat back down, their eyes met, and the air between them shifted. Emily tried to ignore the warmth rising in her chest, but Ethan leaned slightly forward, studying her like he was trying to catch a truth she wasn't. Saying out loud, "I'm really glad you came here." "Today," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have," she admitted. No." Silence stretched between them, gentle, complicated, unspoken. They began talking about ordinary things: work, stress, weekend plans, a random movie they both wanted to watch someday. But woven into every sentence was the same hidden meaning. They missed each other more than they should. Emily kept telling herself that this was just a conversation, just two people catching up, nothing more. But the longer she talked to him, the more she felt something she thought she had buried weeks ago. How deeply. She enjoyed being around him. Ethan had always been easy to talk to. He listened the way people rarely listened, any more fully, completely, with quiet patience. He asked questions no one else thought to ask. He remembered details she mentioned in passing. He had a way of seeing past her words and understanding what she meant but didn't say. That connection was the part she wasn't proud of. Not because it was wrong, but because it was stronger than she ever planned for. When their drinks arrived, Ethan wrapped his hands around his mug and looked at her thoughtfully. "I know we said we should put some distance between us," he slowly, "but, Emily, I can't pretend that sitting across from you doesn't feel right." Her breath caught. "Ethan, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted softly. "I just needed to see you. Even if it's for a few minutes. Even if it's just to know you're okay." Emily looked down at her hands. "You make this really hard." "I know," he said with a quiet sigh. "Trust me, I know." She lifted her eyes, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, two people trying to be reasonable while their hearts kept tugging them in a different direction. It wasn't romantic in an intense way. It wasn't anything inappropriate. It was just an undeniable, feeling warm, complicated, and real. Ethan reached across the table, moving slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to. But she didn't. His fingers brushed her wrist, a light, fragile touch, like he was afraid she might disappear if he held on too tightly. "Emily," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me I'm not the only one who feels this." She swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. She wanted to stay strong, stay calm, stay rational. But something inside her cracked. "You're not the only one," she admitted quietly. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, as if absorbing the relief. When he opened them again, there was something honest and vulnerable in his expression. "I've tried to stay away," he confessed. "I really have. But every time I do, I end up wishing I hadn't. You're different, Emily. You're someone I don't want to lose." She felt her heart thump harder than she expected. "But we said—" "I know what we said," he cut in gently. "But feelings don't follow rules." Emily didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mind was racing too fast. Had she crossed a line simply by showing up today? Was she letting something grow that would only make everything more difficult later? She didn't know. And that uncertainty was exactly why she had tried to stay away. But sitting there looking at Ethan, she realized the truth. She had missed him more than she wanted to admit. The cafe door opened behind her, letting in a cold rush of wind and the loud sound of rain. Normally, she wouldn't have turned around. Normally, she wouldn't have cared who entered. But this time something made her look. And when she did, her entire body went still. It was Mark, Turco worker. Her closest friend, the person who once told her, "You need to be careful with Ethan. You're getting too close." Mark wasn't supposed to be here. Not today. Not now. Not when she was sitting across from the one person she was trying not to fall for. Mark's eyes landed on her immediately. They widened just slightly, barely noticeable, but enough for her stomach to twist. "Emily?" he said, confusion in his voice. "Hey, I didn't know you were here." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Ethan straightened in his seat, trying to look casual. But the tension inside the room shifted, becoming something sharp and heavy. Mark stepped closer. "Wow. Didn't expect to see you here together." Emily forced a laugh that sounded nothing like her. "Just coffee. Long day." Mark's gaze flicked between the two of them. He wasn't judging. He wasn't angry. He simply saw more than she wanted him to see. "You okay?" he asked, lowering his voice. Emily nodded, but her chest felt tight. Mark gave a slow, thoughtful look, not to make her uncomfortable, but because he knew her too well. Then he stepped away to place his order, but Emily could feel the weight of what he saw. Ethan leaned closer, his voice soft. "You don't have to explain anything to him." "I know," she whispered. "But he can tell there's something here." "Is there?" Ethan asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge she wasn't ready to face. Emily turned toward the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. The world outside looked blurred and distant, like everything was happening behind a fogged curtain. Ethan waited patiently, eyes never leaving her. She finally whispered, "I didn't come here to start anything. But I can't deny that being around you feels different." Ethan exhaled, relief and longing mixing in his expression. "That's all I needed to hear." She knew she was in deep. She knew feelings like this didn't simply fade or resolve themselves neatly. But she couldn't walk away. Not yet. Not when sitting across from him felt like breathing clearly for the first time in weeks. As Mark walked past them with his drink, he flashed her a look more curious than anything else before heading out into the rain. Emily felt her heart thud again. Everything had changed in an instant, and she had no idea what would happen next. Ethan reached out once more, not touching her hand this time, but placing his hand near hers. "Giving her the choice, Emily," he said softly. "Don't run from this." She looked at his hand, then at him. Her voice shook. "I'm not proud of how complicated this feels, but I can't pretend I don't feel something." Ethan's eyes warmed. "Neither can I. Outside, The rain kept falling steady, relentless, honest, inside. Emily realized she had already taken a step she couldn't undo. And for the first time, she didn't know whether she was more afraid of the consequences or of walking away from something that felt so right. Emily froze as she saw Mark's familiar face framed by the cafe door. Her heart beat faster than it had when she first saw Ethan. She hadn't expected him to be here. Not today, not now. Mark had always been her friend, her confidant at work, the person who offered guidance when her emotions spun out of control. But seeing him now, just as she had admitted the depth of her feelings to Ethan, sent a shiver down her spine. Mark's eyes darted from her to Ethan. Emily. What's going on here? His voice wasn't angry. It was puzzled, careful, like he didn't want to pressure her but couldn't ignore what he saw. Emily's throat felt tight. She opened her mouth to explain, but no words came out. How could she tell Mark that she was sitting across from the one man who had quietly captured her heart, who had always made her feel alive, without sounding reckless? Ethan, sensing the tension, straightened in his seat. His calm demeanor contrasted with the storm inside her. Mark, he said, polite and steady, good to see you. There was no defensiveness. No fear, only a quiet acknowledgement that he, too, understood this was complicated. Mark raised an eyebrow, glancing at the distance between their hands. He didn't push, didn't make a scene, but his gaze lingered just enough to make Emily acutely aware of how close she was to crossing a line she couldn't take back. I didn't know you two were together, Mark said finally, his tone cautious. We're not, Emily said quickly, her voice firmer than she felt. It's just coffee. That's all. Mark studied her. He could read her like a book, as he always had. Emily, are you sure? She nodded, but her mind raced. Was she sure? She didn't even know what sure meant anymore. Sitting across from Ethan, feeling the gentle warmth radiating from him, hearing his voice calm and understanding, she felt like herself in a way she hadn't felt for months. And that made her afraid more than anything. Mark gave a slow, thoughtful nod. He seemed to accept her words at face value, but Emily could feel his concern. Okay, just take care of yourself, all right? He said softly before stepping away to get his order. Once he was gone, the cafe felt different, smaller, more intimate, as if the world had shrunk down to just the two of them. The hum of the coffee machines, the soft chatter of other patrons, the gentle jazzle of it faded into the background, leaving only the tension between them. Ethan leaned forward, his expression a mix of hope and caution. Emily, you don't have to explain yourself to anyone, he said quietly. Not to him, not to anyone. Just be honest with yourself. Emily looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. I don't know if I can, she admitted. I'm not proud of how much this feels. Like it's more than it should. He reached across the table, not touching her yet, just letting his presence close to hers. Emily, feeling something real isn't wrong. You're not doing anything bad by acknowledging it. Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him, wanted to give herself permission to feel without guilt. But the part of her that had been cautious, that had learned from disappointment, whispered warnings. What if it's a mistake? She whispered. What if this, whatever this is, just complicates everything? Ethan smiled softly, a gentle curve that made her heart ache. Then we handle it together, step by step. No rush, no pressure. We figure it out. For a moment, they just sat there watching the rain streak down the windows. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything they weren't saying aloud, the longing, the fear, the hope. Emily felt a strange mix of exhilaration and nervousness. She had thought she could control her heart, but sitting here, she realized that she couldn't. She finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan, I keep thinking I should walk away, that I shouldn't. But I can't. I don't want to. He leaned closer, careful, steady. You don't have to decide anything right now. Just let yourself feel. That's all I'm asking. Her eyes met his, and she saw a reflection of herself, someone who had been holding back for too long, someone who had been careful with her heart. someone who had forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen. And now, in his presence, that carefulness melted. Emily swallowed hard, her chest tight. "Being with you. It feels like coming home," she admitted, her words barely above a whisper. "Even when I know I shouldn't feel this way." Ethan's eyes softened. "Then let's not fight it," he said gently. "Let's just be here in this moment. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." A small smile broke across Emily's face, a mix of relief, fear, and excitement. She had been holding back for so long, trying to be sensible, trying to protect herself. And now it felt like someone had finally unlocked a door she didn't even realize was closed. Time seemed to slow. The coffee cooled unnoticed. The cafe hummed around them, distant and muted. All that existed was the quiet connection, the shared breath, the unspoken understanding that this was something rare and fragile and worth protecting. Then, as if reminding them of the world outside their bubble, the cafe door opened again. Cold wind rushed in, bringing with it the scent of wet pavement and the sound of raindrops pounding the sidewalk. Emily shivered slightly, and Ethan instinctively moved a little closer, his presence comforting without words. She realized in that moment that the world outside didn't matter. Not the rain, not the obligations, not the past. Right now, all that mattered was this connection, this quiet, fragile spark between them. "Emily," Ethan said softly, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. "Can I see you again tomorrow?" Her heart skipped. She blinked, unable to hide the warmth spreading through her chest. "Yes," she whispered, almost instinctively. "Good," he said, relief and happiness mingling in his tone. "We'll take it slow. One step at a time. No pressure, just honesty." She nodded, feeling a strange lightness. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt like the weight she had been carrying had lifted, even just slightly. There was uncertainty ahead, yes? There would be complications, challenges, moments of doubt. But for now, it was enough to know that someone understood her, that someone cared, that someone saw her in a way no one else had. As they left the cafe, the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle. The streets glistened under the streetlights, reflecting the soft glow of the city. They walked side by side, not holding hands yet, not rushing forward, but simply existing in the same space, feeling the connection between them grow with every step. Emily felt a strange mix of pride and guilt. She wasn't proud of how deeply she had let herself fall for Ethan, especially after everything she had told herself about being careful. But the truth was undeniable. Being near him felt too good to resist. It felt real, it felt alive, it felt like the pieces of herself she had tucked away were finally being recognized. They reached the corner, where they would part ways for the evening. Ethan turned to her, his expression tender. "Tomorrow?" he asked, and his tone made it clear he wasn't just asking, it was a hope. A wish, a gentle plea. Emily smiled, a small, sincere curve of her lips. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice steady now, stronger than before. They shared a quiet moment of understanding, a pause that spoke louder than any words could. No promises, no grand declarations, just the recognition of something delicate and beautiful. The beginning of a connection that neither of them wanted to let slip away. As she walked home, Emily's mind replayed the afternoon over and over. The cautious steps, the soft confessions, the gentle touches. The understanding in Ethan's eyes, it all felt like a dream she didn't want to wake up from. She knew challenges would come, that the world outside her feelings might complicate things. But for the first time, she felt confident in allowing herself to feel, to hope, to embrace the uncertainty. Ethan, meanwhile, walked in the opposite direction, feeling the same mix of relief and anticipation. He had been careful, patient, cautious, but he couldn't ignore what he felt anymore. Seeing Emily, hearing her admit her feelings, feeling the warmth of her presence, it had changed him. It had reminded him what it meant to truly connect with someone. Both of them knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of doubt, questions about timing, fears about consequences. But for now, They had this shared understanding, fragile spark, this beginning of something meaningful, and that was enough. Because sometimes life didn't wait for perfect timing. Sometimes hearts didn't listen to reason. And sometimes the right moment was simply the one you were brave enough to step into. Even when you weren't sure where it would lead, Emily and Ethan had stepped into that moment together. And neither of them would ever forget the feeling of finally giving in, not to recklessness, not to weakness, but to the undeniable truth of what their hearts had wanted all along. The rain continued to fall softly. But Emily didn't mind. It no longer felt cold or inconvenient. It felt like part of the story, part of the quiet beginning of something neither of them had planned. But both of them knew they wanted to see through. Tomorrow, they would meet again. And after tomorrow, who knew? For now, though, they had today. And sometimes that was more than enough.